Hello, everyone, and welcome to Picture Book Palooza. You are in for such a treat today. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank our many sponsors for sharing their talent with us. There are several booths in the exhibit hall, so please make sure to drop by and chat with reps, download galleys, free resources, all kinds of stuff. If this is your first virtual event with us, do make sure to visit the navigation tips in the left main menu. And remember that all of today's sessions will be recorded and available in the sessions window for 3 months. So if you miss anything today, you've got 3 months to go back and check it out. So without any further ado from me, I'm so pleased to welcome our morning keynote guests, Shana Keller, author of CeeCee, Railroad Cinderella, and Karen Boss, senior editor at Charlesbridge. And I will let our guests take it away.
Good morning. Hi, Shauna. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm Karen Boss. As Rebecca said, I'm an editor at Charlesbridge Publishing. And I just want to say how thrilled I am to be with you here today to do this awesome keynote and how much you and I have talked about what a big deal picture books are and how important they are and how it's so important that kids can find themselves in them too. Aren't you just so glad to be here too?
Yes, I'm very excited to be here and share a little bit of this journey that we went on, especially together with everyone here today. Very excited.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's start with some of the questions that you and I decided we wanted to talk about today.
Okay.
And we want to show folks some of the book too. So I'm going to share our first slide that we have to share with folks. And so this one really is about, it's the very beginning of the story, and it's about how CeeCee's name has come to be. So names are a really important theme in this story. Why did you decide to focus on that when you wrote this?
You're absolutely right. They're very important because names bring dignity, and with that, a little bit of power and autonomy. And so, one of the first ways that enslavers could take away a person's personhood, in a sense, was to diminish their name, change their name without that person's consent. So we started out of the gate with the importance of the name.
Okay, fantastic. And in this book, as we know, CeeCee started off as Cecilia and then went to Celia and then ended up as CeeCee. And so
CeeCee.
it's even more indicative of how little enslaved folks had over how people even decided to change their name over time.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was based off of all the research and reading I've done over the years too. And just, little notes or anecdotes about how, oh, my name was changed. My name was changed. And I was like, that's crazy. I can't imagine somebody just coming around and saying, you're no longer Shauna. We're going to call you Shay,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I'd be like, what? It's very
Exactly. Exactly.
disempowering. Yeah. For
All
sure.
right. So let's move to the second slide then. And here, all right. I think we're seeing the second slide now. So you really focus in this book as well around reading, right? And books and stories. And what made you think about how enslaved children might be able to, A, be exposed to these kinds of fairy tales like Cinderella, and then sort of how they might interpret them as they overheard them as some kind of a tool for freedom or escape?
So exactly, like stories have been around for centuries, basically, since humans have been around. We've told stories, whether it's in painting, music, verbally, and then eventually writing. And I think it almost originated back when I was doing my research on Frederick Douglass. And I remember, especially from a child's standpoint, Frederick Douglass making the point of asking the question, why am I a slave? And so he's not the only person, the only child that would have wondered that or asked that, like as we see, like kids, they all think they all have similar questions. And so one of the reasons was like, you're not allowed to read, you're not allowed to learn, you don't get your name. Like his name was changed too. And then he eventually changed his name as well. But he was looking around saying, but like I have 5 fingers, I speak like them, I talk like them. Why am I not human? And this person is human. And so I think his question stayed with me even as I continued research, and then as the ideas for this story kind of coalesced. It's like we have all these things that we compare ourselves to, especially as children, and it's not adding up. Like why do you get all these privileges but I don't? And so taking it another step further, okay, yes, you walk the same, talk the same, eat the same, have the same fun. We all have 5 fingers, on each hand, that kind of thing. We're all still listening to the same stories too. And I remember specifically, this was true, reading, and I can't tell you which one because I've read too many stories from the 1800s. I'm now going to start keeping track of them. But I remember reading a biographical account of a girl that was forced to sleep on the floor because the enslavers' children were having nightmares. And so the parents didn't want to stay with their child, so they made this enslaved girl do it. And while she was doing it, there were stories being read. And then that is what hit me, like, this is another element of we're all the same. Like, they're hearing these same stories. They would have their own dreams. It would trigger their own, vision or goals or things like that. So to eliminate that, or to, it was just never brought to my attention too, to eliminate it, to hide it. It's like, wait a minute, no, these enslaved children were people. They were kids. They had dreams, goals, visions. They're thinking things too. I remember one of my earliest things as a child was having a daydream. Like, one of my earliest memories was my daydream. It wasn't a memory of something, and so I was like, that's a very innate, natural thing for children to do.
Yeah, and I think for sure the Cinderella story, of course, we all know this story, right? And we've known it since we were young. And so you're completely right that if the kids in the family that had enslaved kids working in the main house were reading those stories, then those young children, those enslaved children, were hearing them, right?
Yeah.
And so let's take that and sort of parlay into the next thing that I would love to talk about. And really here, this is one of my favorite images from the book, because what this does is it shows that CeeCee's been punished this night and she's been sent to the attic, but she's got the book with her, right? She's swiped it and she can't read the whole thing yet, but she can read, maybe she's learning to read some of it because of her own, she's really glommed onto the story and remembered the story. But then we also have these mice in the attic, right? Which is a little nod to the Disney version of Cinderella, where the mice help make her gown. And so as you were writing CeeCee, the character, how did you end up thinking about how a young or enslaved people like her would have the courage to make a change in their life? So this story really is about her choosing to take a giant risk to potentially change her life. And I know you have a personal story that relates to this. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you. I will say too, this is one of my favorite spreads because this is me. Like, this was me as a young child, just like, why am I in this situation? It's not fair. How do I get out of this? Who do I trust? Where do I go? What do I do? And not having any, confidence in the different options that I had, basically. And so this is a story that I shared, and I'm happy to share with everybody else, just again, to the power of stories. So I grew up, my brother and I, sister and I, we were in an abusive home. Like, our stepfather basically did the same. We even used the term, she was beaten and taken to the attic. So we were beaten as children. And ironically, it was my brother, my younger brother by 2 years, that ended up, he told a teacher at school what was going on, what was happening. And he told me years later, it's very funny, the only thing that gave him courage to tell a teacher was because of a Spider-Man comic that he read. And in that story, in that comic book, was a story of abuse. And it said, if you are in a, bad situation, reach out, to the adult you trust, the teacher you trust. And in our case, it was our school, our teacher. That was our safe place, was the school and the teachers and librarians. And he reached out, and that's where it became personal. And again, I didn't realize all these elements were being pieced together. My love of history, my personal experience, my passion for sharing, African-American history specifically, all kind of came together, where it's like, oh yeah. And even like you said, Cinderella's been around forever. And when I was doing my research, it's been around for like 2,000 years. So the reason I was sat on that story too was like, the likelihood of every child hearing the story is pretty high. It's very, very high, whether it's offhand or personal, or even when you can't hear the full story, as kids, you daydream and you add your own to it. So stories make an impact, and an impact in my life.
I mean, for sure. And one of the things that makes me, as you're talking about your story, it's making me think about, that all these different layers that can come from reading a picture book, right? And what the author intended, and what you're even describing here, is that you never even intended for this to be a story that had any autobiographical element to it. You were just rewriting Cinderella. But then in retrospect, you've thought more about, well, how might this impact a kid today? And then remembering how a book impacted your brother, which then impacted you and made a huge difference. And so the different layers are just enormous, right? In who can find themselves how in the pages of a picture book.
Yeah, exactly. It's the layers are very intense. And even just, like you said, like having that courage, especially as a young child, because my brother was younger than me at the time. And I was doing what I could, to survive, just like CeeCee's doing what she could. But it does also help to have, you need the courage, but sometimes you also need help, and having the courage to ask somebody for help. And maybe you don't always get help the first time, but, scoping it out and waiting for those moments, it's like, oh yeah, this does make a difference. This does have a huge impact. Like he affected my life, my sister's life, his life,
Yeah.
and the crazy thing is he thought we were going to be mad about that. And I was like, what? You saved our
Oh,
lives.
of course. I mean, anytime we're in a dangerous situation, we're concerned about how it would impact others and who's going to be upset with us, right? So we don't have a slide for this, but in this book, the role of fairy godmother, you put Binti the cook into that role, right? And so she becomes this fairy godmother role, which we all know in Cinderella sort of shows up at the right moment and helps Cinderella figure out. But in this case, this is a person who, much like the teacher in the school you're describing in your own life, Binti is a person that CeeCee talks to regularly, right? They meet up in the kitchen, they talk about things, they speak about their situation or whatever it might be. And I think that that role in any kid's life, as you said, where do you find the safe person, right? And CeeCee finds that in Binti the cook in this case. How did you, when you were initially thinking about that, was it just like, I need a fairy godmother, or were you thinking sort of more broadly about it?
So that was another very layered combination of experience and moments and things like that. Because Binti, I mean, you really could say fairy godmothers are the teachers of today, because, and I can speak from experience now because I am still a substitute teacher, and it blows my mind how much teachers do. And I'm still kind of not on the inside, but, in the community, but I don't have all the responsibilities of a teacher, but I kind of get all the bonuses of it. So it's a good fit, but so Benty comes from, and also even with like going back to the Frederick Douglass, and he wasn't the only one. He's like the most prominent one, like Harriet Tubman's very prominent, where it just took that one little act of kindness from somebody. And it was enough for a child to be like, okay, maybe I can ask again, or maybe this is a safe place. Maybe I can return back to this. And it just, and I did a play on Minty because Harriet Tubman was, her Minty. So I was like, that's too obvious. We're going to say Benty for plan B,
Yep, that's fantastic. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, so she was layered because it was like the experience that a lot of enslaved children specifically, and adults even later on, where, even on the Underground Railroad, it's not like, maybe they didn't offer their house to somebody or their basement, but they just turned the other way so that the people trying to escape could go by without any alarm being raised. So it's kind of a nod to that. And it's the same thing with teachers. I've seen how much teachers do for their students. And again, it just, the love that they have, and that really is more like, because we had to go with the cook, because that's what most like that. They didn't have teachers, specifically for enslaved kids, but they had the cooks, and they were in a place of, in a sense, power and control, where they could dole out and save food, for the starving children on the plantations, or they could say, hey, beware of this person. They were the center of information and, nourishment if needed, whether it's for their spirit, their bodies, their minds, to keep them going. That was something that I personally saw as a theme in all of these autobiographies and histories that I've read.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like is a really important aspect of the story. So, okay, I'm going to share the next slide now.
Okay.
And I can see as people's comments are popping up how much people are loving seeing the art. So that's great, because this next question is about the art. So on this spread, the prince that we see here in the middle of this spread he's not described in the text, right?
Right.
And what you wrote for the text really is enhanced by illustrator Laura Freeman's work here, right? And
Mhm.
she really pulled through and made this prince an African prince. And I'm wondering, what do you think the significance is of CeeCee, like she's specifically dreaming of an African prince in this case?
Yes. So that was huge. And that was such a really neat discovery because I recently got to chat and meet with Laura. And as you said, when I wrote the story, I grew up from all of my writing coaches and professors of you don't give art directions. If you're going to write, you need to write and make it so that your reader can visualize it. They always taught me that art directions were lazy writing. And so I'm very scared to do that. And I did not include any description of the prince. And the crazy thing is that it didn't occur to me to. I said prince. And if I'm being absolutely honest, I envisioned a Disney prince, like, and it didn't
Like
even,
blonde hair or
yeah,
dark black hair, but
blue eyes,
white
light skin,
skin and chiseled and the whole deal,
exactly,
right?
little Ken Barbie
Blue
prince.
eyes.
Yes. So that wasn't even like part of my intention when I was writing. It just didn't even occur because it was so ingrained into how I grew up, how I was raised. When I think of Disney Cinderella and Princess, I think of the light skin, blue eyes, chiseled, exactly like you described. And so what was so neat to learn, and if Laura's here, hi Laura, like, hopefully she doesn't get upset with me for sharing this, but she had the same reaction. She's like, when I first saw the prince, she's like, I drew something and it wasn't what we saw or what's in the book. And then she slept on it and she's like, wait a minute. This is not who CeeCee would be dreaming of. And I was like, Laura, finally, like I can see where we're making that shift of it's not a set standard anymore. And it reminds me of the doll test. Was that from the 60s? Like, yeah, maybe 40s, 50s, 60s, the doll test. And we're still influenced by that narrative. And now we're like, wait, there's different standards of beauty. There's different standards of princes. Even Cinderella was not originally, what was it, Egyptian, if I remember right? Like originally, like it wasn't chiseled, European style. And so when she put that in there, we're like, oh, thank God, because I didn't even think of that, So it was huge. And that shows you too the power of the collaboration that an artist brings.
Yeah, and I think that people generally understand, right, that there are two
Yeah.
creators of any picture book. There's the author and then there's the illustrator. But I
Mhm.
think what people often don't understand is how separate that work is, right? That
Yes.
you write the words, you work with your editor to refine them, and then the illustrator draws the illustrations and you get to see them
Mhm.
along the way, but you don't get to say, this is what you should be drawing on this page,
Exactly.
right? Your
Yeah.
illustrator is a true collaborator in the work.
Mhm.
And I would argue that 9 times out of 10, what the illustrator comes up with enhances and makes the book better, right? Always. Maybe 9.9% of the
Yeah,
time,
I'm
right?
with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but and I think but then occasionally there's like a really amazing moment like this one where we get these sketches in and we send them to you and say, look at what Laura has done with this prince, right? And all of our minds kind of explode
Exactly.
and blow up. And part of that is this is also one of the most important things I think about creator representation and making books.
Mhm.
Because if, for whatever reason, which we would never have done, but if there had been someone to illustrate this book who was not Black, right, who was not of the same background as you and as CeeCee,
Mhm.
then maybe it wouldn't have occurred to that person,
Yeah.
right? And then the book would not be as strong in my mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And maybe it could have been like a prince in European garb, but maybe darker skin, and that
Yeah.
still wouldn't have carried the same weight. And
Right.
it was funny too because I Googled the uniform that I was in. I was like, oh no, was that back then? And so, and yeah, it was around as long as Cinderella. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. But the fact that I wasn't even exposed to it also adds that extra element. And to your point, like with the illustrators, I mean, I can sketch. It's not anything I would show anybody, you know,
Right,
but
right. The illustrators are specific. They're
yes,
very talented at what they do, and
yes.
they're and it's very important that it's one of my favorite things about working on picture books that there are two collaborators who do come
Mhm,
together. So
mhm.
okay, let's share the last slide.
Okay.
And so really at the end of your book, um, and this is not really a spoiler, I don't think, because people
It's
are
kind
going
of out
to
there.
know
Yeah.
that. And so why don't you tell who's listening today, like who
Okay.
is the prince that CeeCee meets in the woods?
Okay. So the Dark Prince, the big reveal is Harriet Tubman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so here when she meets Harriet,
Yes.
Harriet Tubman in down by the river at midnight, right, to start her journey, she hopes to freedom.
Mhm.
And Harriet really makes that point to her, says we're gonna do it, or maybe we're not, but we're
Mhm.
gonna try, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And here, CeeCee finally she hesitates. And then she reveals her true name to Harriet Tubman. And
Mhm.
that's never happened before. We know she has it on a piece of paper in her pocket, but we don't, the reader doesn't know what it is.
Right.
And we don't. And so I'm really wondering why do you think she didn't share it with Binti? She didn't share it even when Binti was helping her to be able to go. But here she decides in this moment to share it.
She goes all in basically. It's like, so one of the sad realities too, during the slavery period is the level of sabotage I think that people faced. And like even Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, like all the big names that we have heard about have faced it. But even some of the smaller names, like where they would plot and then somebody would get scared and they would go and report the plans, the intentions, or even if somebody was trying to escape. And so it's like, who do you trust? Like, and it could be your own brother or sister, because and I get that, because I've been outside in the woods by myself, but knowing I have a cell phone, and this is a planned hike and people are close by, if you need to, like, can you imagine no Google Maps, no cell phone, just pure darkness, like, okay, we're going to go do this. That would scare a lot of people. And it did, and I've read different accounts where people just get cold feet and they tell on each other. And some of them do it because they don't want the person to leave them.
Yep.
They're like, no, like, let's say my sister was trying to leave. I'm like, oh, no, you're not. We're going to suffer together. That's a very common human reaction too. So the amount of people that actually successfully took that first step towards freedom, and that often included walking through the woods through the dark at night, knowing the dogs would come after you, knowing people come after you, was very terrifying. And so I think even in to witness your mother, your family, your brothers and sisters being carted away, because that was
Yep.
also very common. Like for a young child, it's like, who do I trust? Like it was enough at that time for her to just reach out to Bendy and say, okay, nobody would, I mean, she doesn't really come out and say, I'm going to run to freedom. It's more of like,
Right.
no one cares about me. And then Bendy's like, yes, they do. And that's the crazy thing too, going back to teachers, that mirrors so much, even my own experience and what I see in the schools today, students that have a rough childhood and they feel like nobody cares. And it's that one teacher that cares. And
Yep.
then that's what they hold on to for dear life. And so they say, okay, that's going to get them to the next step. And so by the time she realizes her success, that Binti was somebody she could trust, like
Yep.
that teacher was somebody we could trust, then it's kind of like a coming of age, but at a younger point in life. It's almost like a reclamation too, but maybe that's not the right word, because she never lost her name. It's just like, I'm going to declare, this is who I am, this is where I'm going. And when she hears Harriet Tubman, and those were like, I feel like that was something Harriet would have said, based on all the
Right.
documentaries, like, we
Right.
will get there or we won't, but we're going to try,
Yep.
and if you're not willing to try, then go back to the house, because
Yeah, and I also think that, you just said, like, she hadn't lost her name because she had it, on this
yeah.
piece of paper. And I guess that's, she hadn't truly lost it, but she had lost it in many ways. She was called by something completely different. And she also was aware that this name her mother gave her was after her mom. Like it's a
Mhm.
legacy name too,
Yes.
right?
Going
And
back to the
so
heritage.
right. And I think in this moment on the river, she's basically saying, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to take this risk and I'm going to make this journey,
Mhm.
I'm going to do it as my own self and not as this self that other folks have created for me, right? And
Exactly.
in that moment, for me, I read it as a doubling down for her. As you said, it's so scary to take that step. It's so scary to go and do this thing. And she's like, not only am I scared, but in the face of that fear, I am going to be as powerful as I possibly can, and one of the ways I can do that is to reclaim
Yes.
my actual name, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. And like, that's something that even carries over in today. How many times do we hear, be who you are, do you, claim yourself, like, don't be afraid, because once you present your true self, that's when you find your tribe, you know?
Exactly.
Funny that the word tribe is, used today.
Yeah, you find your group, you find your
Yes.
home, and you find your found family, or whoever your people are, right? And I think one of the more powerful messages in the book that you have so beautifully written and Laura has so wonderfully beautifully illustrated is for kids to see that and really see that who I am, what my name. There's so many kids too who there's adults around them who don't take the time to learn to pronounce their names properly, and so they give up and they say, oh, whatever is fine. Maybe this will encourage them to say, actually, you say it like this, and so yeah.
It's funny you say that, because that was me too. Like, now I'm like, oh, there's another element, because my whole life, even all through high school, all through my K through 12 elementary, my name is Shana, so it's Shauna, but I got Shana a lot, and sometimes I got Shanna, and I one time got Sahara, and then usually it's Shana, and I'd be like, it's fine, whatever. And then, but every time you do that, a little part of it just shrinks, and you're like,
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I want to make certain to check
Okay.
and see if there are any questions that have come up during this presentation. We only have about 3 minutes left before we
Okay.
will end. And I don't know if Rebecca will let us know that. Yes. Okay, here she is.
Okay.
I really hate to end this conversation. There's so much love and joy and inspiration in the chat. So, but
Awesome.
we do only have a couple of minutes left. Before I get to the question from Megan, Shauna, Laura is in the audience and she said hi.
Oh, yay.
Love you, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
So Megan is asking, what are some other books that you would pair this one with? And then are there other fairy tale retellings that you love?
Ooh, do you have an answer to that? I mean, I
Oh,
can
is that for
say,
Karen or for me?
well, I think it's for both of us, but
Okay.
I think I will do a very quick plug of another Charlesbridge retelling, which is called Mahogany. It's by Janae Brown Wood. And the illustrator's name is going to escape me right now because it's not my book. I didn't edit the book. But it's called Mahogany. It's a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood and Mahogany is a little black girl who is on her way to her grandma's house. And so that's one that I think would pair quite well with this. It's much lighter, whereas this one is more serious, but they're both retellings of fairy tales that all kids know featuring black girls. So yeah.
Yes. I don't have a retelling, but the one that came to mind was, is it Virginia Hamilton, where we learned to fly? Was that
People
one
can
where they
fly.
walk
People can
back?
fly. Yeah.
Yes, that was a good, but maybe that's more of an original, not a retelling.
I think it is an original, but it's a folktale for sure. And
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
a classic one and a really important one in the kidlit canon for sure too. And
That one came to
it
my
would
mind.
pair beautifully with this. Yeah, I think
Yes.
so.
Awesome. Okay.
And then just real quick, I see it in the chat. Retellings are awesome. I was so happy when they started to gain so much traction, and I love seeing them, especially the familiar ones, right? I mean, we all know Cinderella. We're getting asked, how do you deal with the opposition against retellings? Because not everybody is fond of them.
Oh.
What do you think about that, Shauna?
I think everybody has a story, and everybody has a right to share their story, and not everybody's going to relate to your story, but that's okay. You're still going to put your story out there for the ones that do relate to it. Like, you still got to write it, even if not everybody's going to read it, but you still got to write it. You still got to tell it.
I agree. And I think that nothing can please everybody all of the time. So the goal is to please as many people as you possibly can at any given moment. And I think that goal for sure was met by your book for sure, Shauna.
And it just brings back what you both said earlier. You do you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Reclaim your name.
Reclaim your name.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so we do need to end this session. But thank you so much, Shauna and Karen. It's just been a delightful conversation. Thanks to everybody who joined us for this morning keynote. Next, we have 3 concurrent panels, all in a day's work for the very young and spectacular STEM. So you have a choice to make, but remember, everything's recorded. So pick your one, go back and watch the others later. And thank you again, Karen and Shauna. I hope you have a fabulous day.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
guys. Bye. Thank you.